I clean cars after crimes for a living, mostly expensive ones, the kind with soft leather seats and wide screens in the dash. That night, I was alone in an impound lot garage outside the city, working inside a black luxury SUV that still smelled like rain, copper, and old perfume. The first strange thing happened when I clipped my jump box to the dead battery so I could lower the windows, and the cracked infotainment screen blinked on by itself. The screen was split like ice, but the logo still came up behind the damage. Then the speakers made that bright hands-free chime. An incoming call flashed across the glass before the car answered it without me touching anything. I was bent across the front seats with one knee in a dried patch on the floor mat, and I heard a woman breathing through all the speakers at once. I thought it was my phone at first. I had it in my chest pocket under my Tyvek suit, and I figured maybe the SUV had grabbed it through Bluetooth. It happens sometimes. Old paired devices, half-dead batteries, dumb little glitches that make a car act alive for a second. I checked my phone with the back of my glove. No call, no signal either, which was normal in that garage because the concrete walls were thick and the bay door was closed for odor control. Then the woman whispered, "Can you hear me?" I said nothing. She said, "I'm in the car." That was the part that got me. The voice didn't sound recorded. It had that thin panic people get when they are trying to stay quiet. I leaned closer to the broken display and asked if this was a live call. She cried softly, like she had a hand over her mouth. I went to the garage office, but the landline only clicked, and my cell still had no signal by the small window. At some point I came back because the jump box had begun making a hard relay sound. The SUV's interior lights were pulsing. Every time they brightened, I heard her shift somewhere inside the audio. I asked where she was. She said she was in a parking lot behind a restaurant, locked in her own car, and a man was standing near the back window. That didn't match the impound garage, obviously. Looking back, that was the mistake, because I kept trying to make her describe the place instead of thinking about what she could hear from me. I told her to stay low and not open the doors. She said the doors were already locked, but the locks kept moving by themselves. Right then my steam unit warmed behind me, and the hose knocked against the threshold. Through the speakers she gasped, "He's dragging something on the ground." I stared at the steam wand in my hand. It was stainless steel with a black insulated grip, just a tool I used every week. I moved it by accident, and the metal tip scraped the garage floor. In the speakers, she whimpered and said, "He's at my door." I lowered the wand and stepped away from the SUV. The audio settled. For a few seconds, all I heard was her breathing and the soft ticking of a cooling engine, even though that engine hadn't run in days. So I turned off the steam unit, the extractor, and the work lamp near the rear hatch. I should explain that first. These vehicles are sealed little rooms when you clean them. You tape plastic over openings, pull the mats, run steam into seams, light the stains with UV, and work with the doors mostly closed so the smell and residue don't spread. I climbed back in because I thought the surviving microphone had to be inside the cabin, and maybe I could keep her calm until the signal cleared. But when I pulled the driver's door toward me, she screamed, "No, don't let him in." I stopped with the door half shut. Then I noticed her voice got clearer only when my head was inside. The garage was dim now, with only the SUV's dash glow and a strip of white light under the office door. "Listen," I said, keeping my voice low. "Do you see me?" She answered, "I don't see your face." I asked what she saw. She said a shape outside the tinted glass, tall, covered in white, with something black over its hands. I looked down at my suit and gloves. I tried to help her stay inside. I told her to keep the belt on, keep her head down, and wait for police lights. I didn't know that at the time, obviously, but every instruction I gave her was landing in the wrong moment. She said the man outside was telling her not to move. That was me. Then my UV diagnostic floodlight slipped from the passenger seat and hit my boot. I caught it by reflex and squeezed the trigger. Blue-white light filled the cabin and poured against the tinted windows. The scream came so fast that I dropped the light. "There's a glowing-eyed stalker outside," she shouted. "He's looking right through the glass." I saw my own face shield reflected in the black window, the two small lamp reflections sitting where my eyes should be. The cracked screen flickered, and for 1/6 second, the backup camera showed wet pavement and the blurred sign of a closed restaurant. A man in a white suit was bent beside the SUV. Me, or something made out of what I was doing. I grabbed the heavy wrench from my case and smashed the dashboard console until the screen went black. The first hit only spidered the glass deeper. The second broke the plastic around the vents. I hit the jump box next, hard enough to split the casing and throw sparks across the concrete. The woman screamed once more, then cut off with the same clean Bluetooth chime that had started it. I left the garage without packing the rest of my gear. A week later, my supervisor told me a rookie finished the SUV and the lot sold it at auction. Days after that, a short police note hit the local news. Man found dead inside auctioned SUV. No signs of forced entry mentioned. No suspect named. No witness quoted anywhere. Still, I hear that hands-free chime sometimes in normal cars, and my body goes cold before I can stop it. The worst part is not knowing whether I killed the connection that night, or only taught the car what I sounded like. I have cleaned houses after bad things for almost 20 years, and by then, I knew how to keep my head down and do the job. That night, I was sent alone to an abandoned house near the edge of the city, where a homicide case had already been closed by the police, or at least closed enough for people like me to come in. The house sat past a row of storage yards and dead lots, with weeds up around the porch and plywood over one side window. There was no electricity, so I set my portable generator near the back steps, ran one cord through the kitchen door, and worked by a heavy flashlight clipped to my shoulder. The first thing I noticed was that the kitchen smelled wrong. Blood has its own smell, but under it there was something warmer, almost like old soup. I didn't think much of it at the time. Places like that hold every kind of smell, especially when police tape has been up for days and nobody opens windows. The body had been found near the kitchen table, and the floor still showed where it had happened, even after the first police cleanup. I put down my buckets, mixed the enzyme cleaner, and started with the cabinet bases because fluids run under them and dry in places people don't see. The flashlight beam shook each time the generator coughed outside, and the empty rooms answered with small wooden creaks. After a while, my scraper caught the edge of a loose board beneath the lower cabinets. At first I thought it was water damage, so I pulled harder to check if the wood needed removal. The toe kick came away too easily. Behind it was a black gap, low and narrow, running under the old built-in cabinets. It wasn't part of the normal floor space. Someone had cut into the base and made a crawl space just high enough for a grown person to slide into on their stomach. I backed away and listened. The house gave me the generator hum, the soft tap of something dripping in the sink, and nothing else. Still, the gap changed the room. I wasn't looking at an old cabinet repair anymore. I was looking at a place where somebody could hide with their face inches from the kitchen floor. I took my flashlight off my shoulder and aimed it inside. The beam touched a folded gray blanket, pushed tight against the far wall. When I reached in with my gloved hand, it was warm. That was the detail that made me keep going. If the blanket had been dusty or full of mouse droppings, I would have left it and called the office from outside. But warmth meant recent, maybe minutes. I put the blanket on the floor and shone the light deeper. There were food wrappers tucked into a crack, a plastic spoon, and a small pile of bread crusts on a paper plate. Beside them was a newspaper folded in half, the kind stores still leave near the counter. The date was 2 days old. I should explain that first. Police had been in and out of that house for almost a week. Detectives, scene techs, uniformed officers, maybe the landlord, maybe a medical examiner. They had walked across that kitchen, bagged evidence, taken photos, and stood close enough to the cabinets to touch them. And someone had been under their feet, lying in that tight space, listening to them talk. The part that got me was how careful it looked. The wrappers had been flattened. The spoon had been wiped. Even the blanket had been folded small, like the person didn't want to take up more space than needed. I went outside to call my supervisor, but my phone showed 1 weak bar and then lost it. I stepped past the generator, down to the side yard, and tried again near the broken fence. The call failed twice, so I went to the van for my radio, but the battery light was dead because I'd left it on during the drive. At that point, I should have left everything there and driven away, but my kit was still inside, the generator was running, and I kept thinking maybe it was a homeless person hiding from police, not the killer. Maybe they had already slipped out through some gap I hadn't seen. Maybe I was making it worse in my head. When I returned to the kitchen, the crawl space was empty in a way that felt different. I mean, the blanket and newspaper were still on the floor where I had put them, but the black gap seemed wider now, like the house had opened its mouth a little more. I checked the pantry, then the small back room, then the hall with the bathroom under the stairs. I didn't find anyone. The floors were sticky in places where my cleaner had spread, and my own boot marks showed in the beam. Near the living room door, I found another mark pressed into the dust. It was a bare footprint, small, clear, and facing toward the stairs. I stood there for a bit, listening through the generator hum. Then the upstairs bathroom faucet turned on. It was not a pipe knock or old pressure settling. It was water running hard into a sink. I grabbed the flashlight and went up, keeping close to the wall because the steps dipped in the middle. The sound got louder at the top. The bathroom door was half open, and light from my beam caught water spilling over the sink, running down the cabinet front and across the tile. The room was empty. The mirror was fogged at the edges, and on the wet floor there was one bare print by the tub, fresh enough that water still stood inside it. I reached for the faucet and shut it off. Downstairs, the front door gave one clean clack. Not a slam, not the wind, the deadbolt being turned from the outside. I stood over the flooded tile with my glove still on the faucet, and for a second I understood the whole thing in a plain, ugly way. Whoever had been in that crawl space had not been hiding from the police anymore. They had waded through them. Then they had waded through me while I scrubbed away the last signs of what they'd done. I didn't run right away. That sounds strange, but the upstairs hall was narrow, and my flashlight showed only the top of the stairs and the dark kitchen below. The generator kept coughing outside the back of the house, close enough to hear, too far to help. Water dripped from my sleeve onto the floor. Then, from somewhere below me, not loud, not rushed, a voice said, "You're almost done." I turned the flashlight toward the stairs, and the beam caught the kitchen doorway moving slowly closed. My name is Jude, and I had been cleaning crime scenes long enough to know when a house was trying too hard to look normal. The third time I got called to the same suburban home in 6 months. The lawn was trimmed flat. The hedges were squared off, and the porch light was already on for me. The homeowner met me at the door in a clean shirt and soft house shoes, like it was a normal service call. He said there had been another minor domestic accident, same as before, and he gave a small, tired laugh that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't ask much. People with money like to hide ugly things behind calm words, and my job was to remove what they didn't want seen. Still, the moment I stepped into the front room, I noticed the smell under the lemon polish. Old blood, covered badly. The stain was under the same mahogany sideboard as the last 2 visits. It was a heavy thing, dark wood, brass handles, too large for the room, sitting against a pale wall with family photos above it. I remembered the first stain there because it had soaked into the rug edge. I remembered the second because it had dried in a line that looked dragged. This one was smaller, close to the back leg, almost careful. I didn't think much of it at the time, but that bothered me more than the size. Blood doesn't usually land in a neat place twice, and it doesn't choose the same furniture 3 times. I told myself it could happen. A sick parent, a bad marriage, a pet, anything. The homeowner stayed in the kitchen while I worked, making tea or pretending to. I heard the spoon touch the cup now and then. I put on my gloves, moved my light low, and started testing the edge of the stain with a swab. The floorboards were polished so well they reflected my sleeve. When I pressed my knee down, I saw old marks under the sideboard where my equipment had rubbed the finish on earlier jobs. My marks. My own work was still there, hidden under that heavy wood. After a while, I slid my scraper behind the base to loosen dried material near the wall. The tip hit something hollow. At first I thought the sideboard had a loose back panel, so I leaned closer and used the light from my phone to see under the carved lower edge. There was a small wooden latch tucked inside, the same color as the frame. It was not something you would notice unless your face was almost against the floor. I should explain that first. Cleaners like me see the underside of people's lives. We look under beds, under appliances, behind toilets, in seams and cracks. That is why I found it. The latch opened a thin compartment inside the bottom of the sideboard. No jewelry, no money, just folded paper, stacked tight and tied with a black rubber band. I looked toward the kitchen. The spoon had stopped. For some reason, that made me keep my hand still for a second. Then the kettle clicked off, and I heard the homeowner move lightly across the tile. I pulled the papers out anyway and set them on my open case, telling myself they were maybe old receipts or insurance notes. The thing is, my name was on the first page. It wasn't a letter, it was a log. Jude arrived at 8:14. Blue jacket, gray undershirt, left boot scuffed. Worked stain from outer edge inward. Used enzyme spray first, then peroxide blend. Total visible removal time, 46 minutes. At the bottom, someone had written, "Too much pressure on the brush." I read the next sheet, then another. Each one had a date from one of my visits. The notes listed my gloves, my masks, the brands I carried, the way I turned my shoulders when I lifted the extraction hose. The part that got me was the scoring. Neat numbers in the margin, like a teacher marking homework. I stood up too fast and hit my shoulder on the sideboard. In the kitchen, the homeowner asked, "Everything all right?" His voice was mild. I said I needed another towel from the van. It came out steady enough. I walked to the front hall with the notes folded inside my glove, but the deadbolt had already been turned. Not locked with a key from outside, just set from the inside, quiet and simple. I could see my van through the small glass beside the door. The street beyond it was clean and empty, sprinklers ticking across a neighbor's lawn. At that point, I knew the job had changed, but I still thought I could talk my way out. I went back because there was no other exit near the front, and I didn't want him behind me. Looking back, that was the mistake. The homeowner was no longer in the kitchen doorway. The house had become still in that expensive way, with the refrigerator humming low and the wall clock making small clicks above the sofa. I checked the back door from where I stood. A security bar had been placed across it. It hadn't been there when I carried my kid in. My phone showed one bar, then dropped to no service, which sometimes happens in newer homes with thick glass, but not like that. Not with the router lights blinking on the shelf beside me. I moved back to the sideboard and opened the compartment wider. There was one more note tucked flat against the top, separate from the others. New paper, fresh ink, dated today. It said, "You're getting slow, Jude. I think it's time for your retirement." I read it twice because the words were too calm. Under the sentence, there was a list of chemicals I used for organic breakdown, but the ratios were wrong in a way that made them worse. Stronger. Airborne. A delivery note was clipped to the corner, and my own company name was written beside it, like I had supplied the thing that would be used on me. The HVAC system came on above my head. The vents gave a soft metal tick. Then a smooth rush of air moved through the room. A pale mist pushed out in steady lines from the ceiling slots. It didn't fall like dust. It spread flat and fast, catching the light over the sofa and rolling down toward the floor where my case sat open. I smelled it before it reached me, sharp, bitter, with that hot chemical bite I knew from closed containers and warning labels. It was the same caustic compound I used when something organic had to be broken down past saving. I pulled my respirator from the case, but one strap caught under the sideboard leg. My gloves were wet from the cleaner, and the rubber slipped when I grabbed it. The mist touched the stain under the furniture and made it foam white around the edges. In the kitchen, I heard the homeowner speak, close but not visible. "Don't fight the process." I got the mask over my mouth, but the seal wasn't right. My eyes burned first. Then the floor tilted a little, or maybe I did. I dropped to one knee beside the old marks my own tools had made on the polished wood, and for one strange second, all I could think was that he had been right about one thing. I had gotten slower. My name is Elias, and I had cleaned enough crime scenes by 50 to stop asking why rich people paid extra for silence. The villa was above the city, behind a private road and a black steel gate, all white stone, glass walls, and rooms so clean they felt unused. The job came through a high-end cleaning firm I had never worked for before. They didn't send much, only a contract, a door code, and 3 rules printed in bold. Never open the windows. Always wear noise-canceling headphones with music playing. Never look behind you while working. I thought it was some rich family's privacy system. Maybe cameras, maybe sound sensors, maybe a legal thing. I didn't think much of it at the time, but the contract paid more than 3 normal jobs, and the money had cleared before I parked my van. The inside of the villa looked like a showroom after visiting hours. The kitchen counters were pale marble. The living room had one long beige sofa, and the walls were so smooth that my flashlight made soft white circles on them. There was no body by then, only the work left behind. A dark stain had been cleaned badly near the base of the stairs, and someone had sprayed perfume in the hall, which never helps. I put on my suit, sealed my gloves, started music in the headphones, and carried my kit through the main room with my eyes kept forward. At first, the rules were annoying more than scary. With the headphones on, I could feel the house more than hear it. The scrubber vibrated through my wrists. The extractor pulled at the wet carpet runner. The bass from the music covered the small sounds a house makes when it settles. Still, something about the place kept pressing on me. Every room had huge windows, but none of them had handles. The glass looked expensive and clean, and outside I could see the pool terrace, the dark garden, the city lights below. It should have felt open. Instead, the villa felt sealed. After a while, I found the first detail that made me slow down. In the hallway near the stairs, the drywall had shallow scratches close to the floor, thin pale lines, almost hidden under a fresh coat of paint. I crouched and touched them with one gloved finger. They weren't from furniture. They were too low and too many, and they ran in short curves, like fingernails had dragged there before the wall had been painted over. I looked at the hallway behind me by habit, then caught myself before my head turned all the way. The rule came back to me. Never look behind you while working. I told myself the scratches were old damage. Maybe a dog had been locked inside. Maybe kids. The thing is, I knew what people do to walls when they panic. I had cleaned closet doors with nail marks in the paint, bathroom frames with blood under the trim, car trunks with skin caught in carpet fibers. This was different, but close enough to keep my mind working on it. So I kept going. I should explain that first. I wasn't brave. I was used to finding ugly things after everyone else had left, and I was used to finishing the job anyway. The second detail came from the music. A quiet song was playing, something slow with piano, and under it I heard a tapping that didn't match the beat. I thought the headphones were loose, so I pressed them tighter. The tapping stayed. I shut off the extractor and stood in the hall with one hand on the machine handle. The music kept playing, but behind it, faint and fast, there was another sound. Scratching. It came through the headphones like an insect noise, but spread out across the walls. At that point, I should have walked out and called the firm. Instead, I needed to know if the sound was real or if the headphones were picking up some bad signal. I pulled them off. The house opened around me. Hundreds of scratching sounds filled the hall, the living room, the stairwell, the ceiling above me. They weren't loud, but there were too many, frantic and close, as if every wall had hands moving behind it. Then the whispers came. I couldn't make out full words, only breathy pieces pressed through plaster. Please. Here. Don't clean. I stood with the headphones hanging from one hand, music still playing against my thigh. What really bothered me was that some voices were above me, and some were low near the floor, like the walls had layers. I ran to the nearest window, the wide one facing the pool. I don't know why I thought I could open it after seeing there were no handles. Maybe I thought I could break it. Maybe I just wanted the night air on my face. I swung my metal scraper into the glass. It bounced off and stung my arm. I hit it again, harder. The glass didn't crack. My flashlight beam slid across the edge of the frame, and I saw what the dark outside had hidden before. Behind the beautiful glass, the whole opening had been filled with solid concrete. The pool, the garden, the city lights, all of it was only a printed view or a projection behind sealed glass. The villa had windows that were not windows at all. I turned toward the front door, then stopped because something had changed under my boots. The floor in the living room had looked like dark hardwood when I came in. Smooth, polished, expensive. Now, with the flashlight low, I saw pores in it, fine lines, a pattern that went the wrong way for wood grain. I knelt before I could stop myself and pressed 2 fingers to a seam. It gave a little under my glove, warm from the house, with a dull skin-like pull when I lifted my hand. Behind me, the scratching grew harder. A whisper near the baseboard said, "Don't let them finish you." The main door opened before I reached it. A man in a gray suit stepped inside, as if he had been standing there the whole time. He had no mask, no panic, no surprise. His eyes moved to the headphones lying on the floor, and his mouth made a small, sad shape that was almost a smile. "You broke protocol, Elias." His voice was calm enough to be used in a training video. "You heard them. That means the house heard you too." I lunged for the side of the doorway, but the floor pulled at my boots with a wet grip. I tried to lift one foot, and the polished surface stretched with it, thin and sticky, holding me down. The man sighed, and somewhere inside the walls, the whispers pressed closer. I got one boot free and left the sole behind. The other stayed planted. I grabbed the doorframe and pulled until my knee burned, but the floor rose around my foot like it had softened for me. The man didn't rush. He only stepped aside and looked past me into the clean white room. The scratches in the walls moved faster now. One voice, right under the floor, said, "Headphones on." I looked down and saw the surface closing over the toe of my boot, smoothing itself, making me part of the same dark shine I had mistaken for wood when I walked in. That's all for today. Thanks for listening all the way through. If you enjoyed the stories, leave a comment before you go and let me know what your favorite part was. Don't forget to subscribe, and a quick like really helps too. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.